So I got access to a farm pond. It's hidden away out here in the country. And this little pond has been stocked with largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, bluegill, sun perch, channel cat, flatheads, and for good measure he even threw some blue cats in it. It's not exactly fishing weather, but while I'm here I might as well fish. Years ago I lived in town, and across the alley from me was a guy, let's just call him Donnie, my neighbor. Donnie was one of those gentle souls. Got along with everyone really, really well. Donnie worked a full-time job in a factory. His wife worked at various different convenience stores and such. But at any rate, Donnie ended up being the one who took care of the house, took care of the kids, did all the cooking. So we always referred to Donnie as the best housewife on the block. Have a few stories about Donnie. I've told a few different times, but here's one that probably explains as much about Donnie and why he is the type of person that you just had to enjoy as any other story I know. So while I'm fishing, I'm going to go ahead and set up and talk to you a little bit about neighbor Donnie. So, neighbor Donnie, best housewife on the block. He was poor as a church mouse. Even though him and his wife both worked, they never seemed to have enough money to go around. Okay? It happened that he had an old car. I think if I remember right, it was a Chevy. Had a little 4-cylinder engine in it, spark plugs right on the top. He couldn't afford to take it to a mechanic to get it fixed, so he asked around down at the work. Oops, missed that one. He asked about it down at work, and someone told him they needed to change the spark plugs and the ignition points. Now, that was like speaking Chinese to Donnie, because as much as I wasn't a housewife, he certainly wasn't a mechanic. I apologize for the wind. Ain't much I can do about it. Hopefully it's not gonna keep the fish from biting. So far it's been successful. At any rate, back to Donnie. So he came over and he told me what his dilemma was. He said he was looking for someone real cheap to put him in some spark plugs and some ignition points. And I told him, I said, oh, we can do that, Donnie. And he said, well, maybe you can. And I said, no, we can, Donnie. I'll help you do that. He said, well, when do you want to do it? I told him, Saturday morning. We'll do it Saturday morning. I've got some things going on Saturday, But we can do it. It won't take us too long. We'll do it Saturday morning. Just go ahead and get the points and plugs and have them ready. He said, well, where do I get points and plugs? I said, I'll tell you what, Donnie, I'll do you a favor. I'll just go ahead and pick up the points and plugs for you. I'll go ahead and gap the plugs and we'll be ready. 7 o'clock Saturday morning. He said, oh, I'll be ready. So I did. I picked up the plugs and the points, looked up the specs on his engine. Wasn't no internet in those days, so you always asked the guy at the parts store where'd he gap the plugs. Took them home, got them all gapped up, gathered up my tools, had them all set and ready Friday evening before I went to bed. Okay? Come Saturday morning, woke up, had my coffee, looked at the clock, it's 5 till 7. So I grabbed up the parts, grabbed up the tools, walked through the backyard, across the alley, into Donnie's backyard, and knocked on the door. Nothing. So I knocked again. Nothing. So I went back home to call him on the phone. You see, there weren't cell phones in that days. We had a state-of-the-art wall phone. And it was state-of-the-art because it had a really long cord on it, one of them little curly-up cords that allow you to walk back over to the stove and cook while you're talking. It was in the kitchen there. And while I was there, I grabbed another cup of coffee and called Donnie. The phone rang and rang and rang and rang. He didn't have no answering machine, so it just kept ringing. Finally, his daughter answers the phone. And I asked her, I said, is Donnie there? She said, yes. Who is this? And I told her. She said, let me go wake him up. Now, I'm pretty sure my eyes rolled back in my head, okay? Because I knew for some reason that Donnie must have had a tough evening to still be in bed at 7:15, because he was an early riser. So Donnie comes to the phone. I told him, I said, hey Donnie, sorry to get you out of bed, but what time did you want to change those points and plugs? Donnie says, well, we can do it in just a little bit. I got to fix the kids some breakfast, and then we can do it. I said, well, how about if I go ahead and get started? And he said, well, that'd be okay. You can come get the key. So I went down, I went over, got the key, went down, opened his garage. Now, today's garages are made so that you can open the car door and get in and out of them while you're in the garage. Back then, garages were made where you had about a foot of clearance on either side, okay? And his windows were rolled up. So I struggled with that for a while, and I finally got in and turned the car on. Backed it out, opened the hood, laid all the tools and the parts out right there where we could get started. Because I wasn't going to work on Donnie's car without Donnie being there. Eventually, Donnie came down. I'd already finished my second cup of coffee, was ready to get to work. Maybe we'll use a Black Fury. Okay, at 8:30, Donnie and I are ready to get started. I pick up a spark plug and ask him, do you want to start with the spark plugs or do you want to start with the points? He said, well, there's 4 spark plugs and there's only one set of points. Let's do them first. So I gave him the screwdriver, told him to pop the top off so we could get inside the distributor and get to the points. I showed him how to take the old ones out. Back then you could buy a distributor replacement kit that had points and condenser in it. This one didn't have it because this was cheaper. Just had the points. So we pulled the old points out and I showed him how to rotate the shaft on the distributor so that it was on a high spot. We bumped it and finally got it to where it's just perfect. And I think he understood what I was showing him. So I decided to proceed with putting the points in. And I put them in, you know, and got them semi-snug and got my little feeler gauge out and got the gap in them just where I thought it was exactly perfect. Snugged them down. Had him put the distributor cap on. He did pretty good. He didn't put it on backwards because the wires were still hooked to it. So oh, there's a little bass. So I told him, I said, well, let's get started with them spark plugs. Had a socket. Didn't have the exact right socket. One of those that has the little rubber thingy inside of it that holds the spark plug in place. I just had a regular socket, little largemouth. I stuck the spark plug in it and I showed him how you needed to put the extension on the socket and take that and drop it down into the hole in the head, or in yeah, and use your fingers to get it started. And once you got it started, you put the ratchet on and you tightened it up a little bit. And I showed him how to do that. Okay, I took it back out. I told him, I said, hey Donnie, it's 9 o'clock. I have got to get to the bank. You see, back then, direct deposit meant that you stopped off by the bank on the way home from work and put the money in the account, okay? Didn't have this deal where you work and the check ends up in your account. You had to put it there yourself. Well, I was a bit remiss on Friday evening, in my excitement to get to the auto parts store, I'd forgotten to stop by the bank. And my wife pointed out to me that that was a total violation of the agreement we had. That when I got off work, my primary responsibility was stop by that bank and keep those bill collectors from coming by, pardon me, and the checks we'd mailed from bouncing. So I had to get it there to the bank first thing. Nothing else would do. Some of you know what that's like. You know, when you screw up, the only way you can fix it is to fix it as quick as possible. No slacking off. I had to get to the bank when the bank opened at 9 o'clock. So I handed Donnie the spark plug, socket, and extension, and laid the ratchet there on top of the engine. And I said, Donnie, go ahead and put that one in while I'm gone. Do not over tighten it. Them spark plugs are kind of fragile and they'll break off on you. He said, okay. I turned tail and headed for the bank. Well, the bank was only about a 10-minute drive from the house. So by the time I got there and I deposited the check, oh, got another little one, and got back to the house, it was about 30 minutes, okay? When I walked into Donnie's backyard, I heard the ratchet going squick, 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 like that. And I thought, well, Donnie must be making some progress. When I got to the car, I found out that he was still on the first spark plug. So I asked him, I said, Donnie, you got that spark plug in there yet? He said, no, I've been having some problems. I said, how's that? He said, well, he said, I think I stripped it out. Yeah, that's what I thought he said. I don't know about you, but that's kind of one of those amateur mistakes that you really don't want to have to face up to on a Saturday morning when you got to go golfing at 10 o'clock. But it's what I was looking at. So I said, Donnie, why don't you let me get in there and see what I can figure out? So I grabbed a hold of the ratchet. Whoops, come on. Yep, just a stick. There we go. Grabbed the ratchet, turned it a few times, there was nothing. When I turned it backwards, it didn't click. So I asked him, I said, how'd you get that thing to click? He said, well, I found out if you held on to the shaft down there that it would click when it went backwards. I thought that's what was wrong. I said, no, Donnie, that works, but it ain't the problem. Let me get a look at that. So I pulled out the socket. Of course, like I said, I had the wrong kind of socket. I didn't have one of those with the little rubber spongy thing that hangs onto the spark plug. And that was probably my undoing on this project. Because you see, what had happened was that Donnie couldn't get the spark plug to start, okay? So he pulled it out of the hole and he looked at it. And when he looked at it, he dropped it back in the hole and started trying to wrench it. And for the whole 30 minutes I'd been gone, he'd been wrenching on that spark plug. Wasn't ever going to get tight, because what he'd done is he dropped it in the hole upside down. Had the porcelain part of the spark plug down in the engine. So I told him, I said, Donnie, I think I found the problem. So Donnie looks at me and he said, is it bad? And I said, no, not bad at all. He said, did I strip it out? And I said, no, not even close. I said, it's gonna be an easy fix. He said, what's that? And I said, we just turn it over. He said, turn it over? And I said, yeah, the white part goes up. And he said, I thought the white part was where the spark came out. And I said, nope, the white part's where the spark goes in. So I showed him, once again, how to put that spark plug in. This time, I went ahead and put the wire back on it. I handed him the wrench and had him grab another spark plug, and he commenced to putting the other three in. Surprisingly, he was able to get that done in under 45 minutes. So I made it to my, whoops, hung up again. A lot of cattails in this pond. So I made it to my golf buddies. Oh, there's a stickfish. Made it to my golf buddies in tea time, just a couple minutes late. It was backed up, so no one was inconvenienced. And on top of that, Donnie got his car fixed. Best housewife on the block. And now, master mechanic.